Thank you for clicking on this video, and just a quick heads up viewer, what you're about to see is parts 1 and 2 of what I've uploaded onto my TikTok channel, Old Blue Jimny. If you enjoy this video, leave a like, subscribe, and potentially check out my TikTok channel. If the next few videos I upload onto this channel are of any success, I might consider making YouTube exclusive content as well. Thank you for listening to this short disclaimer, and I hope you enjoy the video. Day 1 of the NC500. If you've watched my previous 2 videos, you're probably well aware that the road trip to Inverness had its issues. Well, having made it to Inverness and having officially started the NC500, we thought, or rather we hoped, nothing else would go wrong, and for about half the day nothing did go wrong. In fact, we'd forgotten all about the drama from the day before. Until, of course, Jim came tire to tarmac with Applecross Pass, the most formidable hurdle he's met to date. We turned off the A896 at Turner Press, passing a vibrantly sticker-covered signpost that told a hopeful tale of all those who came before us, shedding some light on an otherwise grey and wet day. We skittered over the low and winding Kishorn River, and, with a leftward turn, we began our ascent into the mist-cloaked pass above. Initially, the going was good and gradual. Loch Kishorn and Carron, expanding out in the distance, merged into one agitated grey sheet. Soon, however, we hit the hairpins and the climb grew steeper as the misty veil enveloped us. Jimbo groaned on in second and occasionally first when tackling the bends. Eventually, we passed the last bend and tiptoed up the final steep incline, being battered by wind from all sides. Visibility was poor, and the encroaching condensation on the windshield made matters worse. My chief navigator cracked her window in a bid to remedy this, when suddenly a westerly gust of wind pushed a nose-tingling aroma into the cab. My heart skipped a beat, and with a gasp I registered the stifling heat at which the temp gauge was reading. Jimbo was in the red. I promptly pulled us over, hoping that this sudden temperature spike was only due to the treachery of Applecross Pass. Now, back to what's unfolding before your eyes. The drainage bung at the bottom of the radiator was a touch bit too stiff for my soft little hands, so I turned to my good old pipe wrench for some help. Eventually, the drain began to drip, and with geriatric vigour I scrambled to my feet and removed the bung completely. Soon gravity had done its job, and that torrential pour was all but a trickle. I replaced the bung and set about filling up the rad with some water, a seemingly counterintuitive decision, but, I figured, since the liquid that had just come out was the colour of the surface of Mars, an extra flush might be a good idea. In an attempt to reassure myself that I might have a sliver of understanding unto what I was doing, I set about removing the primordial sludge that cradled new and terrifying life forms at the base of the overflow reservoir. Having done that, I replaced it and started Jim up once more and left him to run for a few minutes. With the engine off and the belt stationary, once bitten, twice shy, I got to work removing the bung again, though, this time, my dainty little fingies were up to the task. To the soothing soundtrack of what can only be described as a peaceful babbling brook, and nothing else, I needlessly damaged the radiator. Having relieved some of my pent-up aggression, I unadvisedly assumed my position below the radiator to remove the lower hose and the 3 lower bolts that hold the fan guard in place, though the middle one didn't want to budge. Having gracefully scrambled myself upright, I released the top radiator hose, the 2 remaining guard bolts, and the 2 side bolts that keep the rad in its mounts. And, as if by some divine miracle, the radiator and still attached fan guard slid right out. It's not as if I had to stop filming or anything to try and figure this last step out. Thank you for watching, and please be sure to leave a like and follow for more Jimny related videos. And join me next time when I'll be installing Jimbo's new radiator. This is part 2 of changing Jimbo's radiator. After waiting for Jim to cool back down to a reasonable operating temperature, atop a blustery Applecross Pass with frightfully poor visibility, we pushed on and eventually reached that night's rest. though a little later than expected and fairly exhausted. Day 2 of the NC500. After a late start to an otherwise bleakly bitter day, we were once more on the road. The roads from Big Sand, our night's rest, were rather pleasant, though they were effectively rivers, and the high winds threatened to send us tumbling into the rough waters of Loch Ewe that churn below the cliffs to our left. And, after a couple good miles of motoring, the woes of the 2 days prior were all but forgotten. Until I decided to pull over and lay by somewhere between Lade and First Coast. My chief navigator and I swapped roles so I might take in the monotone coastal views for a few miles. Although, as she pulled off, Jimbo judded and then stalled. Due to a mixture of nervousness and worry as to what lay before her, my driver turned to me with tears in her eyes and said Jim was back in the red. Miserably, we waited in that same coastal lay-by that overlooked the Atlantic, with coastal villages dotted out before us along the road. Soon, Jim was cool, and we doubled back to Lade, where, after he'd cooled down once more, I inspected the radiator. The filler cap was caked in a dark brown sludge. I topped up the rad with some fresh water and made the executive decision that we would blaze the trail ahead. At this point, we were so far from home, it was John O'Groats or bust. Now, back to what's unfolding before your eyes. Having replaced the old fan guard and jostled the new radiator into its mounts, the fixing points on the rad that fix it to its brackets were different from the old one. So, feeling rather MacGyverish, I found 2 washers to act as placeholders until I find something better suited. With the radiator held in place, I set about using the bolts I'd scavenged to attach the fan guard. Then I fitted the top hose and proceeded to ride around on the ground doing something vaguely similar to what I'd done topside. Having vigorously washed all the questionable liquid that had just dripped on my face, I installed the overflow reservoir pipe, cap and bottle. With everything assembled, I began topping up the new rad with some fresh screen After staring at the shapes and squiggles on the back and front of the bottle, I continued topping it up. All that was left to do was to start Jim up and get his new coolant up to temperature, and to top it up as required. With the radiator cap back in place, that was the job done. As for our trip along the NC500, that didn't stop because of a check engine light and overheating engine. Thank you for watching, and please be sure to like and follow for more Jimny related videos. And join me next time when I'll be replacing Jimbo's likely buggered alternator.